Yeah, dude,
Hmm.
congrats on all your success so far. It's been cool to watch from afar.
Yeah, it's definitely uh, been an interesting years, but I feel like I've steadily been learning so much, and um, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, you have ups and downs, but overall, yeah, I've never stopped loving riding my bike. So
What do you
um,
think, what has been
I
some of
think
the
that's
biggest, what are the biggest learnings been through? I mean, I look at guys your age and I hate COVID for a lot of reasons.
hmm
We'll call much more serious reasons than cycling careers. Like people had obviously horrible ill effects from that. But, in a sport where I guess all sports age matters, but for cycling, it's like time is of the essence at times. And do you guys feel kind of robbed a little bit from those 2 seasons that were gone?
yeah, to some degree. It's I'm definitely not one that likes to you know live in the past. I'm really like present and future focused.
Hmm.
Um, it is like for me, it was tough. I mean, coming straight out of juniors where we had a really strong team. I mean, racing nations cups and doing all these races with Lux and with USA, and um, we were good. Like we were,
Hmm.
and but I was always kind of a little bit like I wasn't as good as like Quinn and Magnus, but still we were really close in terms of level and ability. And hitting COVID, and I didn't. I mean, I had one race day or a couple race days at a local race in Georgia in 2020, the Tour of the
Posh.
Southern Highlands.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but that was it. I got as close as the airport in August, trying to come over here to do a few end of season races, but other than that, like I had nothing that whole
Hmm.
year, and I'm definitely the type that is a bit like I push myself, and in general, the hardest part for me is like the easy days and the chilling, and kind of that whole year I was riding my bike a lot,
Hmm.
and sometimes when you ride your bike a lot and maybe a little too hard, like you get like you get really good at long miles because I mean I wasn't really super structured the whole year because you're just nobody knows what's going to happen.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing in 2020 was just a year of no racing, like the confidence. Um, and
Meaning the confidence went
you
down
kind
because
of,
you had no like races to test yourself.
yeah, for sure. And just, it's kind of just the way, like, I do consider myself like pretty humble and sometimes it's like, you have to like kind of switch back into that kind of real, not alpha, but and I mean it goes like when you're racing versus when you're not racing, but
Hmm.
you're not racing for so long, and I'm like, forget what I'm capable of, and you have a whole year between getting all these results as a junior, and other people like got to do some races in Europe and stuff, and I definitely took a hit, and then lost some confidence. 2021 was also tough because then you're straight back into like we had a pretty hard calendar that year, and we like the races I wasn't really gaining confidence because there was definitely a pretty big gap in the level. So it's been an up and down, but um, through those like hard times and stuff, and as you get older, just more time on your bike, you learn, and that's something I'm grateful for,
Yeah. What
for
do you think you
sure.
keep learning from this? What are like the big things that have stood out as just as you're growing as a person and cyclist?
Um, as a cyclist, over time, I mean, it sounds again like I've always been a bit more like shy, but I've learned that the talent is there, and
Hmm.
it's like I know. I mean, I've done from tests from certain races where you might like even races this year where I'm doing way too much in the beginning, covering moves and stuff like that, and and it's taken me time to realize. But when you do get to a certain point and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing these numbers, the results might not quite be there yet, but you through all those like difficult times, when you finally get to a point that you know deep down, like even if this year isn't perfect and I'm not in the world tour next year, or uh, things don't go exactly to plan, like you still have that trust in yourself and that confidence that kind of no matter what happens, like I feel like I've been through a lot. I've been riding my bike for a really long time, and I'm finally at the point that I'm like, okay, like I can see, some file might be leaked, or you might see like a Strava or something of people that are there. And cycling isn't all watts, but it's a good feeling because
Yeah.
you have so much time that's really difficult, because you're struggling and you feel like you might be flying off to a race tomorrow, and you're like, I'm just gonna get smashed. Especially, I mean, 2021, we were doing a lot of point ones, and I remember like lining up in Portugal, and you have a whole quick step team with Casper Asgreen and Sam Bennett, and I'm like, I don't know, I've just come off a year not racing. But then over time, like, I mean, I look back and like it was hard, but as you get older, you realize like anything that's worth having is a struggle. So
Mm-hmm. Man,
yeah, so
that's an
it's been
awesome thing for people to hear, because I think endurance sports, there's a huge component of finding a way to believe in yourself when you're really doubting yourself, and at the same time allowing yourself to be surprised by what you can do. As you're saying, like, holy crap, I'm at the start line with these guys, and you still go into battle. Like, you've got a job to do that day, and you go and execute as best as you can. And I think that's, I mean, dude, we could stop the podcast here, and that's going to inspire some people that are trying to follow behind you. It's
yeah.
it's such a mental game through, because there's ups and there's a lot of downs, and it's trying to manage that.
Yeah.
So usually I love this. Like, the podcast has already started. So for people that don't know Michael Garrison, there's a good little Velo News write-up about you. Obviously, go look at his pro cycling stats. He just mentioned you've done some absolutely massive races. And are you 21 now?
The race age, yeah. Wait, yeah, I'm 21. I'll be 22 in August. So this is my fourth year as under 23.
Okay.
So.
So young dude, to most people listening to this, and just has so much experience already. So I really appreciate you coming on to share some of that. If it sounds good to you, we'll start with a couple, just short. They can either be one word answer, or go on a tangent if you like, and then we'll get it a little bit more in depth into the nitty gritty, so people can catch a quick vibe of who you are. And definitely, I don't want to forget to mention this. Check out Michael. Your Instagram, man, is very unique. Are you very into photography?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like taking pictures, and
you take great photos, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
I appreciate it.
I check in on just see what people are posting here and there, and a lot of Instagram now has, understandably so, people have to support the products that their teams give them, and it kind of becomes more of a commercial. And most of your things are just like these one-off photos. You've got a little black and white vibe that comes through every once in a while. I'm like, dude, this guy's like got a watch out, Jared Gruber. The Georgia water has something going there. So, all right, let's jump into these. So, first one, volume or intensity?
Yeah, these are like all the questions are so tough. I mean, probably intensity. Volume, you gotta ride pretty slow. And I like volume when I'm really riding hard. I like them together.
Okay.
But in the end, it doesn't do the best for me, in terms of general fatigue, hormone type levels, stuff like that. So, I mean, I love going out, and as long as I've done my volume, low intensity, and really like finish those endurance rides, like kind of wanting more, And by the time I hit the intensity, then I'm like rearing to go, earbuds in, like just, I mean, I'm big into like the electronic music, stuff like that. And I just love really, really getting going. So yeah, probably intensity.
All right, fair enough. Long ride, what's your choice of nutrition if you're going out for like a 6-hour ride?
In terms of product?
Like gels, bars, and candy, or real food, or people are now really into like a lot of fluid calories. Like, what's the mix going on, or do you change it up all the time?
Generally, I'm on the fluid side. I like it. It's pretty easy for me to track. I mean, I'm a bigger rider, higher numbers, higher kilojoule expenditure, and I mean, I'm always wanting at least 90 grams an hour, up to 120, just because if the stomach can handle it and I'm recovering better, then why not? And when I have mix in the bottles, like it's just so easy. And then I'll bring some, like, whether it's like little biscuits or a sandwich or something if it's a really long day, just for that,
Does a sandwich get funky?
Eating. Yeah, I mean, it'll get a little smashed up and stuff.
Okay. It's like, I'm always curious. Like, I don't do much real food, and I'm always curious. Like, sometimes I want it though, at like hour 4 or 5, and I'll maybe stop to get something. But I know guys that bring stuff. I'm like, I don't know. I just can't. It doesn't stay right. But anyways,
yeah, I don't know. Just like a little stop. I don't know. Like it's almost like a picnic. Like find a nice town, have a sandwich. But yeah, other than that, like my body works really well with like sucrose, like just table sugar, because it's, I don't know, like I've used like fancier products, which are 2-to-1, and I'll make my own mix as well, like maltodextrin fructose powder. But also like literally a 1-to-1 glucose fructose is also, I mean, I've had less stomach problems with that than with the fancy OTE mix that we're racing with that might only be 80.
Dude, it's crazy.
So yeah.
So do you just use yeah, wow. My buddy Landry, who coaches with us, is onto that, and he turned me onto it. And I just started doing this over the past 6 months. I'm like, wow, I spent a lot of money that I never needed to before on the fancy stuff.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, learn it now and never.
Yeah, it's still like I'm still kind of testing it. And I'll do some days that I'm like on the 2-to-1, and I'll do some days that I'm on the 1-to-1, and kind of just still gauging how I really feel.
Do you put salt in that?
And that's more training, and then and sometimes like some lemon. But just I kind of just eyeball it.
Yeah.
But yeah, much more fluid than, I'm not a big fan of gels. At a gravel race I did last year, I made my own, like I melted down my own, made my own gels. I had these 2 big like plastic flasks, and it was a big sugar race, and it was going to be like a 5-hour race, and so I took 500 grams of sugar, and I melted it, and I added some honey and some maple syrup, so that it kind of helped like keep it jelly.
Yeah.
And I put that into like little plastic Amazon flasks.
Dude,
and unfortunately at the race I had a lot of punctures, but I think some of the best legs I've ever had.
Wow. So, that's interesting. Yeah, maple syrup. I do the reusable flask. It's been incredible. I'm shocked. Again, I was like, wow, I bought a lot of gels. The wrappers just got annoying to me after a while. And I was like, I don't need to have, super long ride, these pocket full of wrappers. I wanted to try and find a way around it. But next one, tire width for the road.
We're racing on 28s.
Okay. Speed suit or bibs and
wider. Jeans? Racing generally speed suit.
Wax chain or wet lube or something else?
Not wax.
I like
Dry lube, wet lube, depending on the weather.
what don't you like about wax? Because people try and always convince me to do this, and it's just too much work.
Yeah, that exactly. I
Okay.
think I don't know. Maybe if I was in the States in in a home and kind of have a lot more
Mm,
appliances and stuff.
right.
But here in apartments, it's like I don't know. I just wipe the chain. I don't know. Maybe wax is better, but I just haven't got around to it. So
You probably ride too much
yeah.
for it to, yeah, in the gym or not worth it.
This is a good one. Uh, in the gym,
What are you
I
doing?
did I did a pretty into uh what was it 20 from 2021 into 2022 in that winter. I did like a lot of gym, um working with a strength coach, but I was probably pushing a bit too much, and I made a lot of gains but also added a bit too much muscle. And you kind of realize in the racing here where the flat day will still have 2,000 meters, 6,000 feet, like it's definitely different than
Mhm,
say like US racing.
mhm,
And I still really enjoy the gym. I love like I really like sometimes I like will be super unmotivated to go to the gym and I'll go and you see all these other people like training. And for me
mhm,
that's really cool. It'd be like
yeah,
I always say like to some buddies is like it'd be like if you went out riding and there was like somebody you were passing like every or somebody on the road like every 50 meters. Like and that always gets me like stoked and inspired and I always feel better when I leave. I'm a big fan of just like trap bar deadlift, like normal back squat, like RDLs because I do notice my hamstrings get really tight,
mhm.
and are a bit weaker. And then just basic like band work, um, simple stuff like one-legged RDLs with a kettlebell. Um, but also like it can be easy for me to go in there and do too much.
Mhm.
And so nowadays it's like uh, not as regimented, especially when we're racing. But I do enjoy the gym.
Yeah, I think the fatigue can be higher than we realize, and, like, sometimes you notice it on the
Hmm.
bike, obviously, like, "Oh, damn, I overcooked that." But I just think there's a lot that we can't measure and know when we leave the gym, and that's, yeah, it's interesting. I'm excited. I know I was talking to Adam Mills from Source Endurance, and he was talking about how there's more, like, power meter devices coming out for lifting. Yeah, I don't think the tech is very usable for everybody yet, but if we could just know more, I think it would be really interesting to gauge that and help us not do too much.
Hmm.
But maybe someday. Group ride or solo smash?
Being from Atlanta, um, big city where I grew up, I have to say group ride. I mean, that's the groups in Atlanta, the people in Atlanta are the reason I've kind of got so far. I mean, from the age of maybe 12, 13, like on the Tuesday, Thursday rides, hanging on as long as I could each week. And that was like my gauge. I would
Mhm.
slowly last a little longer, last a little longer. Um, and then we've got a Saturday, Sunday ride that we just smash each other. And
Is that
yeah, I mean,
airport?
that, the Sunday one's airport. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I think it was not this past winter, but the winter before. Like, I remember we were like Roscoff, me, Artem Schmidt, who's now on the team,
Mhm.
like Oliver Flott. I mean, just like hitters. And we're out there just like in December, just beating each other to shreds. And yeah, it's like, but you finish those rides just stoked. And like, so, I mean, maybe I was doing a little too much in December, but I mean, it was a great time. So,
Kept the
yeah,
motivation
really
going.
like the community. Yeah, the community there is really cool. Even if the riding, like the roads and all are, I mean, we stop a lot, but the groups are great. So.
That's awesome. Stage race or one day?
With stage races, I generally like get better in terms of
Mm.
fatigue management.
Mm.
But in terms of my future and goals, one day.
Is there anything that you're doing as you're going through a stage race in the beginning to think down the road of, hey, I got to make it 7 days or 11 days or whatever it might be to help you with that fatigue management?
Not necessarily. We're generally like, I mean, I did finished a race about a week ago in the Ardennes. It was 4 days. And I mean, this is one of the hardest races. I think it's probably the hardest race I've ever done in terms of the race as a whole. And in races like that, it's like you're just day by day, like one day at a time.
Yeah.
And really just like staying in the moment. And I mean, the stage races I mean, that one was 4 days, but was still like, I mean, the second day, my TSS was just under 400, and the third day was like 360 something. I mean, this is like up and down 10% climbs like all day. And at this race, like I'm not a pure climber, and I'm just like looking at every day like one at a time. And it's, I mean, I have the next race I do is in France in Bretagne, and it's 7 days. And if I look at the race as a whole, like, okay, we're doing 1,300 kilometers and 15,000 meters of elevation. It's like, I can't look at that whole thing right now.
No.
Like,
Oh,
just
man.
one day at a time. And just really being present, because if you're thinking too far ahead, you're going to overstress yourself. Focusing on, the sleep, the fueling, the like eating enough is maybe the hardest part. And yeah, it's tiring, but day by day for sure.
Cool. Okay. What are you up to when you're not riding? This is the last short question.
I've taken classes at this university in Georgia, and that's gone somewhat okay. Like I've had to drop them in past semesters when the racing, like, that's, I think, one of the things that's really underrated in terms of the sport is just kind of how hard it actually is, especially when you're doing stage races. In terms of like stress in the bunch, just the stress on your head, stress on the body for sure. But I mean, especially at the smaller races, like the last one we did was a 2.2. So it was no World Tour teams, but a lot of French Conti teams, some Eastern European Conti teams, and in the big races with the World Tour teams, like the break goes, that might be kind of an easy fight. You might have a quick step or like Ineos that blocks the road because the small teams go up the road, and there's a pecking order, and like the break's gone, we ride super easy. But at the kind of mid-level races, everybody is always stressed. There's always like tension in the peloton. Never really gets easy, and it just like, I mean, when you're doing that for 4.5 hours, it's like tough. I mean, your brain is like on. And so I've struggled for sure to. I mean, once you start racing in the season, and even when you finish those races for like 2 days, you're just dead, and you just want to lay on the couch. But in terms of off the bike, like, I mean, I've gotten to have a really good network here in town, and just I really prioritize those relationships in terms of like, I mean, cooking and getting together. I do really like to cook. That's like one of my favorite things to do, and taking time to, like, I don't care about, the long walk to the better store or stuff like that. And in terms of these 2 weeks between races, like that's what I've really been on. I'm a super musical person. I grew up playing the piano, playing sax, so I listen to a lot of music, play some music. But I mean, we just keeping your body really relaxed. Um, However that works for you is the most important thing. But again, like the network and community and friendships here, just guys that they'll come over and we'll just hang out and lay in the sun and talk about life.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, it's nice for sure. So and just switching
Musically,
off from.
if we open up your Spotify, what are the last three things you listen to, or things that come to mind?
I can look a lot of. I mean, it's crazy because I have such a wide. I mean, I grew up studying jazz, so I played sax, or
Oh,
first played
cool.
piano and then played sax. Was studying jazz, and so I kind of have that theory interest, that side. But nowadays, it's a lot of like house music, techno, electronic, um, and then I've got like my one of my like oldies playlists, which is like some country music, some like some Rascal Flats. Like when you're like in the kitchen and just hanging out, it's like the real like feel good. Uh, but on the bike, it's a lot of electronic
Okay.
oriented
Yeah.
music. It's definitely my jam. But it's a big variety. I listen to everything.
Cool. That works. What's the best advice that you've ever received, whether cycling or non-cycling related?
There's a I definitely have a few kind of cycling related. I would say I remember being at a training camp in my first year on action, and we had an old sports director, Jeff Lauder, and I never really he had said this advice, and I never really like took it to heart when he said it. But then as I've gotten a bit more experience and honestly discovered it in my own living, and I look back on that, I'm like, whoa.
Mm.
And what he was saying is like you get all these young guys, and they're trying to like look for the golden egg, or the fast track way to like fitness, whether it's like I don't know, doing some crazy low carb, like weird fasted training, or like, ooh, I've got this new like method where nobody else does this, and like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna be way better than everyone. And I look back on it and I'm like, dang, like that is like so true.
Mm.
Because in the end, if you just really trust yourself and trust that you have it in you, it's just gonna take time of riding your bike. Like you don't need to absolutely destroy yourself every day, because it's like not how training works. Like
Mm.
trusting yourself, trusting the patience, living a normal life, focusing on the little things, like just kind of being pretty normal, uh, and not going too crazy on one end, too crazy on the other end, and just trusting that process. Like you're gonna get there,
Mm.
and generally, if you honestly take two steps back and let yourself relax, and almost approach it as I want this to be a slow process, you're probably going to reach the end goal faster than you think. Rather than if you try to rush everything, you might injure yourself. You might, I don't know, get sick. Like you won't be, I don't know, you'll be under recovering, and then you might, in 2 weeks see some weird gain, but then in the end, you're probably going to have some setback.
Mm.
And that really stuck with me. Just being patient and being normal and trusting.
That that's
So
like a perfect clip to send to a million people, because it's just, a lot of people want everything in 18 months, and if they haven't reached cat 1 in 18 months, they're like, "Oh, I just suck at this." It's like, "No, man, you gotta just keep
hmm
going. You're just getting started. What are you
yeah,
talking about? Let's go."
yeah,
Love the bike and
yeah,
just keep working at your
Mhm.
process. That's awesome to hear from you.
Yeah.
What?
And it's the same thing with
No, go ahead.
it's the same thing with like endurance training. Like I think a lot of people overstress their bodies or go do their long rides at I don't know 300 watts, and then they're just at some point you're going to break. Versus if
Mm.
you just take the step back, let yourself give your body the room to adapt, then you're going to get good.
So this is a question that comes up very often from a lot of people, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier about riding easy. So endurance rides, do you have a specific target that you look for every time, or do you? The question is always to me, hey, should I ride at 75% FTP or 60% FTP? And I think it's a great question because there's a lot of reasons why I think there's a case for both. But how do you gauge your endurance rides?
I I mean, we're riding our bikes a lot, and
What's a normal week?
generally the way I between 20-25 hours.
Okay.
Um, I mean, not like I mean, when we're in between races, it's
Mhm.
less. I think training camp I did 228s. Um, so like yeah, that was a lot.
Mhm.
And I'm really if I'm in my head like I need to ride at this number, then that in the end creates more stressors than if I'm not in my head. And I really like looking at my heart rate
Mm.
rather than just my watts. I mean, it's a balance,
Mhm.
but for me, I know a general range, and like I mean, for me, endurance will be between say 240 and 275. I mean, I could go higher, but I don't see much gain because in the end, I just get a bit more tired, feel like I don't recover as well, and I don't mind. Like again, I'm in this for the long run. I don't need
Mhm.
to go out and do all my endurance rides at 280, 290, even though it's
Mhm.
possible.
Mhm.
Like, and through power testing, like we will do inside testing so I can see. I know 260 is like the number for me.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
this is where my body really switches from fat metabolism to a higher carbohydrate, like where the curve really dips.
Mhm.
Um, but honestly, like I'll ride a little between say 230, 260. Um, but I try to ease towards the lower end because then when it comes to the intensity and I finish those endurance rides, like, yeah, I mean, I did work today. I put a stimulus on my body, uh, but I feel like I can still have a normal day with energy. I haven't left everything out there, yada, yada, yada.
Mhm.
Then when it comes to the time to go hard, because I've had like, say I have a just 3 day, we're just doing endurance for these 3 days, rest day. Then I finished Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, each day, like, oh, I finished that ride knowing I had 10, 20%, like, I mean, endurance rides again, but even mentally
Mhm.
in my head, like I was backing off. And then when it's time to push, then you've been building up, and then you're just ready to like go rip.
Mhm.
And even on those super hard days, you finish those with like, even if you're pushing higher watts than you were expecting because you've been holding back, uh, like I do like, and this also plays in when you're racing a lot, but when you can just almost like cut that workout, like not necessarily cut it, but if you're going well, then you're going to finish the workout with a good sensation, not utterly smashed, like downing a bunch of like maybe too many gels or whatever, or like
Mhm.
stressing out about it. If you can keep that body in like a relaxed state, go do your workout, but almost feel like you had one more. And then by the time, then when you go to race, you know, you're not like, oh, I went full gas. I did X watts for this many minutes. When we get to this one climb, if this is all I have, like, is this going to be enough?
Mhm.
And I always love leaving that room for mystery of that, like, I've saved myself. And then when you go to race, you have that 5% of, in all these sessions, I've had that little bit left. And I was never like really like smashing myself, like grim death in these trainings. And then when you go to race, like, then it's time, then it's like, all right, now we can really see like what we've been training. Because in all those sessions, you're still creating stimulus and leaving room for recovery and leaving yourself excitement and room for that excitement for when you go race. But
That's awesome, man. I love that approach. Yeah. No, that is really like a holistic way to look at training as applied to your racing. I think that's incredible. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
what do you think is one of your best attributes in cycling, and how do you use that to your advantage without giving out any secrets to your competitors?
I mean, ever since my years, even before juniors, 15, 16, I've always had like just the engine. I've always had the ability to kind of just ride all day. I mean, even in the COVID years, I think I did, I don't know, I rode a lot. And in terms of races that are hard all day, it's always interesting because I might struggle a bit more. I'm kind of changing as a rider, but like, for example, last year, I would always struggle a bit more in the beginning when guys are fresh, and the outputs are really high. But I could almost feel like those guys around me getting a bit more tired, and then me kind of coming to the level and then riding better at the finish. But in terms of, I'm really excited. We don't have many time trials this year. I mean, US Pro, I think maybe I'll do under 23 nationals. We'll see, depending on the calendar. But in terms of my, like, that engine and my ability to recover after hard anaerobic efforts has really improved. And just like breakaways, I don't know, I just like hard races.
Cool.
And just that general aerobic level, I definitely think is probably my biggest strong suit.
So on the flip side, what's a limiter, and what are you doing to work on it that you think you need to get better at?
In the past, my biggest weakness has been my kick, my sprint, my finish. I've always had the kind of ability to ride Peloton in the finish in terms of the hecticness, the bunch. But I've just never had that pure kick. And I think a lot of it is just because, like, when I was young, I would ride a lot and I would ride hard. And that nervous system was always just a bit underwater. And so really just focusing on the freshness, incorporating a lot more sprints into my training, but just like keeping it fun. And then, I mean, it's a balance because, say, I did more work in the gym, and that's then there's like the cost benefit because you might add a bit more muscle, but then you're not climbing as well.
So it cut out for a second. Were you saying that you rode too hard when you were younger, so you think it dulled you later?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Just doing a lot of rides where I would just burn the match all day, and then of course you can't sprint. But no, it's definitely getting to a point that I'm comfortable and almost confident with in terms of say a small group comes to the finish. Even Because the thing is, with sprinting in bunches, it's 80% where you are, which is
Mm-hmm.
maybe harder than sprinting itself because they're so hectic. But positioning is everything, and I mean, you have guys that are pushing 1200, you have guys that are pushing 14, 15. But the guy pushing 1200 is 6 wheels in front of the guy pushing 15, and it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter about what anyone's doing. So
Can you share, so when you're looking at your kind of overall training, and we don't have to add this in if you don't want to, what's your, some people do more polarized where it's a lot of riding easy and then they go super ham. Other people believe in like more low threshold riding. Some people kind of have a mix of everything. Where do you sort of stand with that? And if you don't want to talk about that, we
I
don't have
like
to.
doing. I mean, it's good by me. I mean, I like riding my endurance slow and
Mhm.
really putting the priority on zone two, and staying there, enjoying my rides, not stressing that I need to perfectly stay in zone two. But like I said, when I do really emphasize that upper limit and staying under that, like when you're on a climb or something, it's going to feel slow. But then again, you finish the ride and you're excited for the intensity. And then,
Mhm.
and honestly, not really trusting those easier rides, because a lot of times, and in the past as well, I've almost wanted to push so much more on the longer rides, on the intensity, like almost out of an insecurity, like
Mm.
kind of a more negative, like it's true, a more negative look at things. Like I'm, even if I woke up tired, I'm like, I'm not good enough, so I need to go out and like, it's almost like every training session, the more training sessions I did, was like another reminder that that I'm like still not good enough, versus just trust, like, because I almost like wouldn't trust those easier sessions.
Mm.
And it just became this kind of spiral of like too much stress, not enough recovery. And then when I'm not recovered, then I wasn't making the adaptations. And then I was like, we need to, like, I want to go again.
Mm.
Um, and I do feel like if you can just really trust and enjoy the process and know that like, it doesn't need to be so brutal.
Mm.
And I feel like I see a lot of guys that really overextend themselves because they think that's what sport needs to be. And that, like, you need to finish smashed every day. And everybody has different opinions. But I'm definitely one that I know I'm at my best when I finish sessions happy and have the, like, the hormone balance to be happy, have the carbohydrates in my brain to be, for my brain to like be happy. And yeah, just trusting those easy rides, and then not doing too much. Again, in race season, where the races we're doing are a lot,
Mhm.
um, and it's taken time to learn, but because it's hard, because when you're like, oh, I'm just doing some easy zone two rides and like twice a week, threshold VO2, whatever, any type of work. Um, but then when you go to the races, and then you really see like, oh man, like when I'm pushing in these races, like I'm doing records, and
Yeah.
that's exciting because the racing is what it's all about. So yeah, for sure, much more polarized.
When you're doing the threshold or VO2 sessions, do you have any favorite workouts between those two?
Um, yeah, I like them both. I think I really like doing threshold on my time trial bike, just
Mm.
because I'm flying. I'm really pushing.
What would
Um,
you do?
I don't like to overcomplicate things. I mean, depending on what I'm focusing on. Like I like breaking down, say US Pro Nationals is a 40-minute race. If I can do 4 10-minute blocks of X watts or even a little bit under, because, there's always time to grow. I mean, I don't think in general I would do a TT more than 40 minutes. So yeah, I like a simple 4x10. I don't know. I think I did a lot of 2x20 when I was young, and I don't love those. I mean, it's a long time. Even if you're a little under, like even if you're a little sub threshold, I like doing the longer blocks on a longer ride at more of a like sweet spot. But yeah, there's plenty of different sessions out there.
Yeah.
But in chunks that are reasonable and things that you draw confidence from rather than scare you. Because I never want to look at a workout and be like, I can't do that. Because I feel like if you've done your endurance rides easy enough and you've really focused on the fueling and the recovery, like when you do get to those hard sessions, you should approach them with excitement and intensity, like just like what they called, because you can go hard every day and life's a balance.
Yeah. You have a very zen-like approach to the training, man. It's awesome. It's definitely more than just robotically trying to put out watts, which it's such a focus these days, it seems like. But what's one of your biggest inspirations to keep pushing forward? It's a tough sport. It's a tough career that you're kind of undertaking. What's keeping you going?
It's interesting because, I mean, I saw this question and I was thinking about the questions, and I was actually on a ride 2 hours ago with two of my teammates, like best mates, and as always with friends. I mean, today we were talking about like, oh, like what if something happened and like we couldn't race next year, or you didn't sign a contract, something like that. And when I saw this question about inspiration, like what keeps me inspired, it's almost like you, after a certain amount of time in the sport, a certain number of relationships built and bridges built, friendships, all that type of stuff, teammates, guys you race with. It's almost like I don't know what I would do if I stopped. It's almost like there is no, like, the inspiration is just creates itself, because like it's almost like you have so many close friends, like bonds. I mean, guys I'm racing with, you have this huge community, and it's like this is it's kind of it's not all but it's like it's just what life's always been. And it's almost like I don't need to think about motivation or inspiration, because you're just, I don't know, it's just like training is what I love to do and racing is what I love to do, and like that's it. And I think that's definitely something special, that because when you're young, you don't know anybody. It feels like everybody's a competitor. Like it feels like it's everybody against each other, but in reality, I mean, some of like even guys in the world tour, old teammates that are in the world tour now, like the guys are still friends, and you're just like a big network, and you still train with each other. You still, go for coffees, hang out, like anything like that. And I'm almost like, if I like stopped racing, or stopped being a part of the cycling world, which I don't think it's going to happen, then I don't know. It's because all the relationships are here in this sport, in this world, in this lifestyle. So that question definitely stuck out to me because I was like, I never really think about like what I like how to be inspired because it's just it's there.
Yeah.
So if that makes
I
any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And it's actually making me think, as somebody who found this sport, like cycling changed my life, and I'm just an amateur cyclist. And I can tell you that the relationships and the way it's affected me is crazy to think back of life pre cycling. So for someone like you who's been doing it your whole life, when you add on another 20 years and you're 40 and you look back, man, you're going to have, even post racing, you're going to have so many more different stories and relationships from the non-racing side, and like just the network will continue to grow. I I'm
Mm-hmm.
excited for you to experience that as also, because it's just something about endurance sports. I think if we were rowing or if we were running, it's just similar. There's just a bond. This actually just came up. Somebody asked, I was with Owen Schott, who's another Masters guy, and we were at dinner.
Yeah.
And someone's like, "How do you guys know each other?" I'm like, "Oh," and we kind of like reminisce. We're like, "Oh, we like raced against each other, and we like tried to be on this team, and then we did it." And we were just going back through like a little history, and that's just with one person. And I think that we're all so
Yeah.
fortunate to find this sport and have those experiences. So yeah, just
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's cool. You nail it. It's not really something that specifically inspires you, but it's just there. It's just part of
Yeah.
cycling and the journey.
Yeah. Like
What's
it's like being in a cobweb and I mean, all those webs, like there's no way out of it. I don't know. I mean, it's great.
I got a couple more for you. I know we're kind of hitting an hour. I don't want to take up too much of your day. What do you think's you've given a ton of gems, and you do have a really, I want to almost say like holistic way of looking at your training and your racing, but is there anything maybe that jumps out when you think of your daily routine that gives you the biggest return to your success in the sport? Or more so, I mean, the sport really is your life. So maybe what's one thing that
Mhm.
you try to have in your daily routine that you just get a lot back from?
I think the biggest thing in terms of for me, um, and also that I think other people that are really like cycling is a greater or the biggest part of their life, um, is not letting cycling really determine like I don't know the best way to put it. Not letting like yourself get lazy, like because not lazy. I don't know. It's like I wake up early. Like I go to bed early. I wake up early. Um, I like focus on the little things, like whether it's taking time to cook, taking like cleaning, all that normal life things that anybody else does, and putting that putting that first. Because if I can keep some type of consistency, because in the end, as a pro cyclist, you can only like on the biggest days you ride your bike for 6 hours, or most days, say an average of three. It's not that much time. Like
Mm.
a normal day job, you're working 9 to 5, and you're probably waking up before that, and driving to an office, whatever. And most people probably have families, all this type of stuff. And in the end, I'm like, our lives are pretty easy, and you get a lot of guys that, and this works for them. Um, and I'm just talking about myself, but it's really easy to sleep super late, train super late, uh, get nothing done. Um, and for me, I mean, I wake up at say 7:30, um, which for here is Spain is definitely on a much later schedule.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, most people here, I'd probably say wake up 8:39. I mean, the grocery stores don't open till 9 a.m. And to have that, like, no matter what happens, to have that time and space and sense of like, okay, like I got up early, or I got up at the same time, and this makes me feel more like a normal person than a cyclist. Then I feel like I leave that other side of my personality, because when I wake up early, I always feel better about myself. Whether it's, I always do like yoga or stretching in the morning, make my coffee, do some reading, whether it's a book, the news, like just whatever a person that's not dedicating their life to sport might be doing. Because then if I do sleep super late, then I don't know, it's like I'm surrendering my identity to like all being cyclist. Like, oh, I did this I don't know. And that sense of normalcy, like it's super easy for athletes to be like, oh yeah, I did this. So like I did this big ride, so I can be lazy and sleep whatever, and it's okay. And it's just everybody has a different style, but for me, I like to finish my training with the energy to still have a normal day, because in the end, I think that's how it should be. Like, to still accomplish things like going to the store, relationships, friends, anything, and yeah, getting to bed on time and waking up not before the sun rises, because the sun rises really early. At least now it rises really early. But I just love starting my day in the morning, and just the little things like unloading the dishwasher. I don't know, just things that you might not always love to do, but you know, so much of our time we're spent at races where we literally have to do like nothing, and we get lazy and honestly take enjoyment out of my time and space in the morning to clean, to like do things I don't always love to do, because then you build that confidence off those little actions, and then feel like you set yourself up for success.
Small wins. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you, I was going to ask you what would be maybe one of your best pieces of advice for a newer cyclist, and that kind of is a pretty big piece of advice there, but would you change anything if somebody was like, hey man, you know, I admire where you're at. I've looked through kind of how you've gotten there. What should I do to try to get to your level, and maybe even hopefully where you're shooting to go? What would you tell them? If different than what you just said.
I'd say, wait, I wrote something down from this last book I read.
What was that book?
I can't remember. I've read. I like to read books on like, I don't know, self development type.
Yeah.
Or no, maybe it was a podcast. But
what podcast are you listening to?
Let's see, I have it in my.
I like to ask questions on top of questions.
Yeah. This was from the Science of Success.
Okay.
Wait, was it this one? Oh no, the book I'm reading is called How to Do the Work.
Okay.
And in terms of advice, like really focusing on the little things that you might not always love to do, whether it's washing your bike every day or making your bed or cleaning your room. I don't know, just the things that are just like that everybody does, but you don't always love to do. But if you really kind of meditate on those, and I mean, this book, one of the things that really stood out that I wrote down is that discipline leads to confidence, which leads to change, which leads to transformation. And if you can really build that confidence through focusing on those little things. I mean, it can be super easy to go out the door and be like, "Oh, I just have water in my bottle." It's like, it's okay.
Mm.
Or like, "Oh, I don't know." But if you're like, "Oh no, I'll like take this, you know, 5 minutes to stop by the store, get whatever I need to make this a ride that I'm really going to enjoy." And it's like it's just a little thing. It's just 5 minutes, and then I don't know, any little tasks that you can build, that you can meditate on and be like, okay, that was a little like kind of difficult, but it only took me like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then that creates confidence, which then you just build on that, and it's just a positive spiral. Um,
That really
so that was
parallels.
something that really,
No, that's really good. It parallels. I was just reading this book where they were talking about how one of the reasons we fail is just the lack of our execution on our actions. And we're always very results oriented. And really, our results are just what happens from our actions. And that if we more focus on what you're actually doing, don't focus on where you're trying to go, because the only thing that's taking you there is what you actually do. So it's like you go out the door with no carbs and
yeah,
you have just water in your bottle, you messed up the execution on your action. It's not that you had a bad ride, like
yeah,
it was the actions. And I was like, man, that's such a basic
yeah,
concept, but yeah, that kind of makes sense. So no,
yeah,
that's really good. I like that. Were
and just
there
finding ways that you really enjoy a process,
hmm,
um, whether it's music or whatever works for you. We're all our own individuals, and
yeah.
um, yeah,
Dude, this was awesome. You have a lot of really good gems and good mindset and just the way you look at life more than just training and cycling. Were there any other questions? I you answered a lot of them without me actually asking them. Were any others that jumped out that you want to share an answer to? And I appreciate you taking a look through those.
hmm.
And I also want to be sensitive to your time, so I
uh,
could have sat here and talked to you for 2 hours, but we might have to have you back at some point in
no,
time.
I, no, I'm chilling. Um, top three skills for success. I wrote humility, confidence, and discipline, which all tie together. Like
Mhm.
humility, I wrote the man who believes he knows everything learns nothing.
Mm.
Um, I think, especially in sport, you get a lot of guys with egos that aren't willing to. They've always been maybe good or always been right, and they're not willing to constantly be learning. And at some point, they might be really good in sport, but sport can't last their whole lives. And at some point, like, times are maybe going to get a little bit more difficult. Um, yeah, like number one daily routine. I said make a happy life the priority.
Mm.
Focus on being a normal person, being a happy person, and the cycling is just on top of that. And if
Mm.
you're happy and healthy and not over stressing things, like trying to do some weird nutrition trend or diet or and just you know some sense of like making happiness at the top. And then if you have a happy balanced life, you're going to be a happy good cyclist. On top
Mm.
of that, training's going to go well.
What's a fad in
um,
cycling right now? Because you kind of mentioned don't get
I
sucked into
struggled
this.
with I struggled with that one.
Okay. It's tough because I
I
want people to
mean,
like poo poo on something, but sometimes there's like I always laugh. Stephen Bassett was like fat burning. He's like, I'm so tired of people not eating carbs and telling me that they're fat burning. I was like, okay.
yeah. I mean, yeah, kind like for sure. Yeah, I'm interested to see like what comes after like tubeless,
Mm.
because we went from tubulars and now we're riding tubeless. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we're racing on tubeless.
Are you
Uh,
training
but
on
I feel like at some
tubeless?
point it's some of the guys are. I'm not. I have some old wheels.
Okay.
um, but on my gravel bike, like gravel and mountain bike, are tubeless
Mm.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So And then equipment. You had one question. There was two interesting things about equipment. The team BMC has a new handlebar. It's the stock bar on the Caius gravel bike that I'm racing. I'm racing Unbound, so I'll be on that bike there. But this bike, the bar is a 36 on the tops, and it flares to a 40, 42.
Okay.
It flares a good bit on the drop.
Yeah.
But this bike is now, this bar is now on the road.
Mm.
So most of the guys on our race bikes, we have this narrow bar.
Dang.
I hate it.
Really?
Too narrow.
Too narrow.
And that's the big trend in cycling now is the narrow bars. I actually saw a photo of this guy's bars from Redlands. His name's Drake Duell, and his were like a 30 on the tops and flared. But just in the bunch, something with the responsiveness on the narrow bar, just I don't like it.
That's interesting to hear. Yeah, I think I have the
it's
38s, and it's not. I can't imagine going much more narrow. And there was a guy I heard at, I'm going to blank, Rouge Roubaix, so kind of not gravelly, but like dirt roads. And I think he had like 28s or something. And someone was like, it was so sketchy. He did well. I mean, but still, that's nerve wracking if somebody can't really.
Yeah, it's a lot of stress and tension in the shoulders. And then something about the way it feels in the bunch is just it doesn't feel right. But
you've talked about that, and that's one thing that I cannot. Big bunches as an amateur cyclist here. A big race is probably 80 guys. Every once in a while, as a Cat 1, you get into a race with maybe 100 guys. It's like, whoa, there's a lot of people. Was there anything that helped you to be more comfortable in a bunch of 150 guys, especially when you're talking about, and maybe more, and you said there's a pecking order. And so as the guys are not like, oh, hey, it's Michael Garrison, come on here, take this wheel. And you're the exact opposite. What do you do for that? Confidence-wise, skill-wise, is it just going and doing the reps and being in the races, or is there a trick to that?
I mean, some guys never get it, and I've seen guys in the U23s that are some of the most talented physically, but they can't ride in position, and there's no way to explain like positioning in the bunches in these races, like it's like it's a war, literally. I mean, like you're coming in, say, to a not bike path, and it depends on the race, but say for example, if the road is wide and you're coming, like a lot of times you might be coming big descent, and you might go through like the last race we did, a lot of these real small French towns in the Ardennes, so lots of steep climbs and stuff, and little towns with a bunch of turns and small roads. And you're full gas, like literally sprinting down hills into towns, especially as you're getting into the finale. Like, I mean, it's like I'd be riding 500-600 watts with a teammate on the wheel, and you're spread curb to curb because every team is doing that. And it's like 60, 70, 80 k an hour in these downhills and I mean, it's like, because this is the most important part. If you're top 5-10 wheels into the turn, into the 12% climb, then that's a hell of a difference than being 100th wheel, 50th wheel, because those guys, if you're turning onto a narrow road, like by the time the guys in the back are turning onto the climb, the guys at the front are a minute and a half, like not that much, but seriously, like maybe 300-400 meters up. And really flipping that switch in your brain that like this turn right here is the finish. And it's the same thing with sprints or with with any finale, and it's hard because it's really dangerous. It's really scary. Like, I mean, you have guys of all different age groups, a lot of anger, a lot of like testosterone, and it's. I mean, if you did the things that, like, for example, going curb to curb into a turn, and there's guys coming up on the inside, like, if I did this at any U.S. race, like, people would freak out because it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it's scary and it's mentally taxing, but that's just that's part of it. And I had actually written that down for what's underrated is like just how not petrifying, but like seriously intense things are. And especially in the smaller races where you don't have, it's not like, okay, Ineos is in the leader's jersey. All right, they're going to ride. Okay, Jumbo's riding too because they've got Van Aert, like stuff like that. And then those races get real calm. I mean, still in the finales, they'll be full gas, but at certain races, yeah, it's just like, it's dangerous and it's scary.
I mean, I seriously, like, just hearing stories about this, it freaks me out because there are some, like P1 races that I'll get to do every once in a while back in the day. And it was just the next level. Cause those guys, are racing some pro Conti teams. So for them to race with Cat 1s, they're not nervous at all. We're all like, oh my God, this is so fast. There's so many people. And I can only imagine the races that you're doing. But I think it's good for people to hear that it is terrifying to somebody like you in those situations of going extremely fast. There's not much room for mistakes. And a lot of times newer cyclists, I just get the vibe through talking to them that they think it's going to be just a fitness competition. And then they start racing and they're all these nerves and all this other stuff comes up. And I'm like, this is part of it. Like, there's the fitness side, but that's not everything that goes into it. It's, unfortunately, watts per kg is not going to win you the race, as you've brought up many times. And that's really important for people to hear, especially when they're starting out and maybe getting those kind of just frightened feelings. Is more than nervous at times.
Yeah. I mean, it's depending on the race, but it could be 60% how you're riding your position and 40% your fitness. Because you could be the strongest guy in the race, but you're riding last wheel, climb after climb, chase after chase, like you're burning way more matches than if you're riding top 10 wheels, flowing through, carrying speed into climbs, like. And I think that's what people don't quite understand about it. And then, like, it's definitely an interesting dynamic of the, like, kind of European versus American. I feel like Europeans, because they've been racing so much since they were young, and they have a lot, like, especially Belgian, like, they have a lot of race opportunities. They don't need or at least from a young age, they haven't needed as much to do as much, like, training, like sessions, because they race and they recover, and then they maybe, at least from some guys I've known, and they go ride with some mates. Because as a 15, 16, you could have 3, I think, well, you're restricted. I think as 15, 16 in Belgium, you can race twice a week. 17, 18, I think 3 or 4 times. But at these races, there'll be 200 kids there. And like, crazy. You're racing hard, you're learning how to position, and it's not, they're not thinking about, like, oh, this climb, this watts. Like, it's racing. It's like first person across the line. Not thinking about, I did this many watts for this minutes. And especially in the kind of like, it's much more, I see it more in like the American, who spend a lot more time in the training, in the watts per kilo, and the sessions and stuff like that, rather than like, how can I be a craftier racer, and how can I be the first guy across the line, and focusing on that balance as well, rather than just pure power.
There's a really good podcast that I actually want to make a podcast about to highlight, because it's a smaller podcast I'd never heard of. Somebody sent it to me, but Andy Coggan was on it, the guy who wrote Training and Racing with a Power Meter with Hunter Allen. And he reiterates there's no better predictor of performance than performance itself. And this guy, he's I don't know if he's a physiologist, but he's clearly into the science and the numbers. He's wrote a book about training with power, and he's talking about people need to get away from this a little bit and look at the actual results, the racing, race specificity. Like, we've just become so, I got to do my 3x15 at this, and I got to do this at this, and this. Okay, I'm ready to go. And it's like, and it disappoints people, because then they go and they do these sessions and they've seen a 20-watt increase in FTP. They still get blown out the back, and now they're sad. And it's like, okay, but you're trying to take one game and win at a different game called racing. And so it's awesome to hear you talk about this, because a lot of people don't talk. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know why it's become so focused. And I think the data and the numbers are really great and they can help us, but it's just a tool. You still have to go and it goes back to execute. And that's why racing is so fun. The strongest guy doesn't always win because the strongest, you've got to use your brain and understand when to use the watts. You got a lot of gems, man, for somebody so young. It's, I don't know. I'm excited to see where things continue to go for you. It's really awesome. And, you mentioned the Atlanta community. Man, I've heard your name so many times of even just, oh man, Michael Garrison was at the ride. You really motivate and inspire a lot of people just by your actions of being present. And it seems that the community has provided something to you, but you are definitely providing something back to them. And I don't want to speak for other people, but I know a ton of people that would echo that. So keep doing what you're doing as Michael Garrison, because it's definitely having an impact, which hopefully feels good. It's not just your race results, but it's how you show up. And that's going to last longer to a lot of people. So it definitely means a lot. Man, this was great. I don't want to take up more of your time. This was massive. Really, thank you for taking the time to do this. So many good insights, and hopefully at some point in time I can buy you a coffee, and would love to cross paths on a ride somewhere. And so this will be actually the last question of the podcast. What's the next, let's say, 2 to 3 months looking like for you? So you're in Girona. What are the plans coming up?
On my next race is Tour de Bretagne.
Okay.
That's a 7-day race. I go there. It starts Tuesday of next week. Starts in a week. Then fingers crossed for under 23 Roubaix, which is, I think, somewhere after the first week of May. The middle of May, I think, maybe is a bit drier. There's a chance I'm still in talks, but some races with the U23 national team. And then we'll come back, race Unbound. Middle of June is still a bit up in the air, but then US Pro, and then back over here in July.
Cool.
Certainly looking forward to US Pro. So, I mean, you never know exactly what you're going to be doing, but you gotta, one day at a time. So,
I think you'll be ready to rip no matter what. It sounds like. Keep your process rolling, man.
For
sure. All right. Any last words?
I don't think so.
All right. Hey, you had many already, so. Everybody, thanks for checking out the podcast. Follow Michael on Instagram. You on Twitter?
Yeah, but I don't use it too much.
We'll stick to Instagram. Thank you for doing this, and we'll talk to you guys soon. And
I appreciate it.
Thank you.